Hi, my name is Jerry Grady. I am a managing director at UHY Advisors, and I'm the managing office partner for the Ann Arbor office at UHY. Nice to see you, John.
Jerry, thanks so much for making time to join us on the IvyPodcast. Before we dive in and talk about all the great projects you're leading at UHY, give us a thumbnail version of your career prior to that.
Yep, so I've actually been here for 38 years. I know I look young, but I am an old guy. I cut the gray off specifically for this this podcast today. I actually started here. It's interesting. I started here with a background in accounting and technology, and we use that to help grow my career. And over the 38 years, we've been blessed with a lot of great clients, and we have done a really great job of putting together a team that is very, very focused in the staffing industry and also in utilizing technology in the staffing industry. So I do mainly tax work. I don't do a lot of financial audits anymore, but I'm really a more consultative approach. So I'm always consulting with our clients.
Well, that's super exciting. And thank you for sharing that. Tell us a little bit more about UHY. What problem are you guys solving?
Yep. So UHY, we're not what you call your typical bean counter firm. We really are a firm that is extremely highly consultative. We always go into a client and figure out how can we take them to the what we call the next level. Most of our clients are looking for someone to come in, help them grow, help them, put in processes, procedures. They might be looking at creating a lifestyle business, but more importantly, most of our clients are looking at how do we create a business that we can either sell or that we could keep going on from generation to generation. One of the greatest things about UHY is that a lot of our clients have been family owned, closely held businesses. And those businesses today many of them are in their third generation. So we have done a really good job of helping clients be able to grow, succession plan down their business to their children, or succession plan it to either some private equity groups or some funding and mezzanine funding, and then help them to continue grow. The ultimate for all our clients is when we partake in helping them sell their business. That is where everybody gets the rewards of what we've started. Most of the clients I work with today and UHY work with, a lot of them probably started in the $3 to $4 million range. And then, 20 years, 25 years later, they're either 70, 50, 100, maybe even $1 billion. And we've been with them all the way. So it's a group of about 1,200 employees across the country, 27 plus offices. And then we have an international affiliation that allows us to help our clients be able to go international. So many of my staffing firms have actually gone international. And then I've had many staffing firms who came over from international, like the UK, London specifically, or the Philippines, some of them from Japan. And then we got a really strong China group. And so we have a lot of Chinese oriented firms as well. So it's a pretty well valued or a very well rounded firm. And we like to call it more of a business consultative approach than just a typical CPA firm.
Well, that's very exciting. And I'm sure you've seen tremendous growth in this sector in the past couple of years, especially through the pandemic and company just in this extremely highly competitive market, especially in the staffing side, with organizations going on a global scale, trying to find the best talent out there, which I want to dive a little bit deeper on with you in terms of your personal strategies for managing your teams. But before we do that, in terms of the different trends that you're personally very excited about in your space, in your industry, what are you researching? What are you mostly excited about?
What I think I'm really, really excited about is a lot of the work from home models that have been implemented over the last, 2-3 years with the pandemic, and looking at companies on how are they finally leveraging technology. Being in the technology field when I first came out of school and really seeing that technology could leverage industries, a lot of companies still thought of it as a cost center. They didn't really look at it as a way to leverage the operations, leverage their teams. When the pandemic hit, in less than 24 hours, the entire world went to a work from home model. And those that had that technology in place, the ability to quickly jump on a cloud or the ability to quickly be able to VPN in and out or work from anywhere and without affecting any of their operations, those were the firms that took a really, really high jump in what you call the growth factor. They are also the firms that have taken a really high growth in retaining and grabbing clients or talent right now. We are seeing that technology, whether it be, whether it be like a Workum or something of that nature. And again, no disrespect to any other products out there. It's just the one that popped in my head at that moment. They utilize those products to help streamline their operations. But I will say, John, the biggest thing that excites me the most is when they cross technology and operations. There is a point, there's a midpoint that if you put too much technology in, you lose that personal relationship. And when you lose that personal relationship with your recruiters or with your talent, what happens is the technology actually starts to motivate your team, but it also starts to demotivate and demoralize your earnings. The earnings we see start dropping. So I think that, technology, and when you say technology, yeah, there's a lot there, but I think it's those that are using it correctly, those that are finding a way to automate their ATS system, with the back office and also with their vendors, and those that are streamlining the recruiting process and finding a way to talk. I am still a huge believer, and always will be, that a phone is still the best way to find people. It's the way it works. So when I see people use technology in the sense of, hey, I hear it's your birthday. Hey, I hear you just accomplished this. Hey, we heard you just worked 125 days straight, or we just got some great news about what you did at a client. Those are the things that I think are great for technology and streaming and updating and giving people that good feel. When technology is used to replace every little personal event, now that's when I get worried and what concerns me the most.
Right, absolutely. Couldn't agree more with you. There's always that right balance that you have to find between the two. So thank you for sharing that. In terms of just, you've mentioned consultative approach within your organization, within your teams, but for a company of this size, I would imagine that's also a continuous, not really a challenge, but an objective to maintain that very personal touch, very consultative, that kind of almost that startup feel where you have to cater, and spend a lot of, invest into building the relationship with the clients that you partner with. Tell us a little bit more about those strategies. How do you continuously maintain that culture of innovation, that culture of consultative approach as the company grows and scales?
Yep, and John, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, when I started here, we were 45 people. Today at this office in the Michigan-based location, we're just under 500 people now. So in 38 years, we grew. And how do you keep that culture? It is not easy. We all know that. John and Grady built a model that was very unique in the industry. They built what we call a teams approach. So instead of in a typical accounting firm, you would have a tax side, a consulting side, and an attest side. John and Grady decided to build what are called groups. They decided that each partner would build their own base of firms inside the firm. So, you would work with a core team of people. And so you were training them consultative knowledge, you were training them tax knowledge, you were training them the attest knowledge. Then if you needed more specific knowledge, you would reach out to that person that was tied to that specific function, such as a test, or if you had a really in-depth tax question, you would reach out to our tax leaders at that point. But what it did is it created a breed of 14 partners who all came up in the same realm. They all understood that the consultative approach is where clients really need the value. And so from that point forward, all the way up today, even though we've become much more structured as an organization, it's embedded in all our teams, all our partners here, all our principals here, our managers, senior managers. We have all grown in that model that building and consulting is what really our clients are paying us for. I hate to say this, but anybody can do a tax return. They really can. And what makes the difference is how we train our people. So when I meet with a client, I invest somebody's time. a staff person comes with me. That person comes with me to sit at the client meeting to see what we're discussing, whether it's estate planning, whether it's growth planning, whether it's commission structure, whether it's implementation of a technology. They're there with me, and we're investing our resources so that that client sees that we're going to continue that cultural build. When we go out to find the talent, we look for those people that really are the blue collar workers. They put themselves through school. They worked all the way through school. They looked and had to really do things in a different manner. So the schools we hire from are the same way. They look at and train people on the thought process. So there's this thought process that we try to get through to everybody. It doesn't always work for everybody, John. I mean, we'll be the first to say that, it's a tough product tough to implement this culture because it's not for everybody. We have become more, what I would say, more linear, but when we became linear, we also went extremely deep into the industries. So that when you look at our industry teams, our manufacturing team, our staffing team, our technology team, when you look at those teams, we've built them, 3-4 miles deep, that their knowledge base is extremely tight. So if I walk into a manufacturer, I will pull from that manufacturing team so that my consultative approach is still working for my clients. And then, our teams are very active in associations. I will say the associations build that knowledge and build that consultative approach.
Right, absolutely. No, that's definitely, resonates on so many levels, which leads me to a further question I wanted to ask you in terms of building your teams, especially in this environment where the teams are dispersed. It's virtual environments, and for you to continuously grow, surrounding yourself with the top talent probably remains as one of the top strategic priorities, whether you're actively recruiting or not. Tell us a little bit more about some of the case studies or maybe practical recommendations that help you succeed in this highly competitive market, but at the same time attract and retain the top talent to your teams.
Well, I give kudos to our recruiting team, our HR team, and our college recruiting team as well. They really have put together a lot of different ideas, and when we tried them all, whatever they wanted to do, we shot them out there and said, let's see what works. So from a standpoint of retaining talent right out of college, our campus recruiters immediately start putting together, I don't want to call them happy hours, but they were like happy hours. And we literally start doing those once a week with the various schools, getting together with some of the associations at the school and starting to put down what we call career days. And, we would just consistently push it, consistently flush it, push it through the social media platforms, hit the LinkedIn, hit the Instagram, hit the Facebook, push it hard. And we saw a really great base of people coming in. What we then did is we wrapped that around by doing quarterly meetings with our internal teams who were there to talk to the recruiting people who were coming on board. So we might put on hey, come listen to what it's like in a day in the life of a UHY employee. And that way, you have 2 or 3 people who were the UHY staff or seniors, and they would talk about what they do on a daily basis. And that's how we were engaging into the colleges. One of the greatest things that I think our campus recruiting team did is they actually created a platform where we brought in all the firms around the state of Michigan to participate in a full day accounting knowledge-based, I don't even know the right word to use here, but it was a full-blown day of all the accounting firms just talking about accounting, and they invited about 20 some odd schools. And so kudos to our team, because that really showed that we were leaders and that we were really focused on our employees. When it comes to recruiting, what you call the seasoned veterans, that's a little different, a lot more difficult to do. That's where the phone calls come in. Me, myself, many of our partners, many of our principals, when we see somebody on LinkedIn or we hear about somebody that we think would be a really good fit, we just pick up the phone. I mean, I literally pick up the phone, I call them and I say, hey, tell me about what's going on where you're working. What are you guys doing on a day-to-day basis? What's your work from home model? Do you have a hybrid model? What works? What doesn't work? And we're listening and we're hearing and we're gathering all this information. And then we utilize that information, to talk about what we're doing that works in that area. So for example, we hosted monthly manager meetings, which again, probably every other firm in the world did too, but they were done in such a fashion that it was not it's, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. It was, hey, what do we as a company need to do better for you? What aren't we doing that you need today? And so that's how we were able to find out that our teams needed to come back. We found out that our teams were not happy being at home. They didn't like fully working at home. We found out that our staff members didn't feel like the technology, they love it that they could work from home, but it wasn't giving them that personal relationship that they wanted to have. And so what happened is we converted to more of a hybrid model very quickly. That hybrid model actually helped us with recruiting. We start seeing more people wanting to come back because they needed that personal relationship. They wanted to be part of a team. They wanted to be part of a group. Now, of course, all the rules are in place. Our people are safe. We follow. We got plexiglass up, but everybody's cubes. Everybody wears masks when they're walking around the office. But for 2 years, it really has been a great experience for both our young people and for our seasoned people. And translating it to numbers, 150 new people over 2 years. So obviously those practices we did, Jan, are working very well for us.
Well, that's super exciting. And thank you for sharing that, some of those strategies. And to double click on that a little bit further, in terms of how you structure your interviews, obviously you mentioned that you love to pick up the phone and have that conversation with the candidate directly, which makes perfect sense. But in terms of some of the, just creating that two-way street conversation with the candidates to allow them an opportunity to ask you the questions and make the assessment if this is the right environment for them to join. How do you go about that? What types of questions you like to ask? Tell us a little bit more, maybe a little bit of an insight into your interview structure.
Yep. So what I usually do when I pick up a phone and I call someone, I will literally just say, hey, I'm just saw something on LinkedIn. You posted. I found it really interesting. Can you just tell me a little bit about yourself? 9 times out of 10, they'll say, well, I'm really not looking. And I'll just say, I'm sure you're not looking, but I just found it interesting. So, there's nothing wrong with having a conversation or a cup of coffee. And that helps kind of open the door a little bit. And so, I will just ask them, where did you go to school? Did you work when you were in school? What are the sports you like? I'm really just trying, myself, I'm building that personal relationship. The idea is that what I'm trying to get to is to get them at least interested to understanding that we took the time to get to know them, that we reached out to them. If I can get to that point, that's where I then let the recruiting teams take over. I will say, hey, you know what, this has been a great conversation. I really enjoyed the fact that, you ran track or you played soccer or you played water polo. I love listening to that type of stuff. And it really fits that you fit into our model. And I know when we started, you said you weren't really interested, but it really would be good if, maybe if you took a couple minutes just to talk to our recruiter, just to see if maybe there's ever a possibility of you coming in here. Then what we do is the recruiter will set up a call with them. And then we have the staff. The staff then set up a call with them. And then the manager sets up the call. And then if we get them to the point that we really think they're, oh, these guys are really interested, we're going to bring them in. We're going to have lunch and we're going to bring them in and we're going to really talk about, here is a day at UHY. We walk them around the office. They meet all the different partners. They meet all the different managers. But the idea is to build that personal relationship. That's what we're really starting at, Jan.
Oh, that's very exciting. And I think interviews is such a subjective matter in terms of being able to create that environment for them to make that assessment. I think that's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. For you to stay ahead of the game in terms of your industry and some of the research that you conduct, share some of the sources that you consume on a daily basis as part of your content diet.
Yep. Yeah. I would say the biggest content I use a lot of is LinkedIn. I'm constantly on LinkedIn. I read a lot of articles on LinkedIn. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of tax articles we read. There's Bloomberg, there's BNA. I get a daily blast from both of them that talk about what's going on. And then, but for the staffing industry, I really have a lot of ASA, SIA, TechServe. I get newsletters from them every day, little blips from them. I subscribe to as many of those daily blips that you can get. And then I find those that attract, one, attract my eye, but more intently attract for my client. What I know that my client could really gain some information. I read one a couple weeks ago about compensation and some of the compensation models and how some firms are changing them, where they're decreasing base or increasing base, and making them more team oriented. And so I read those and I get to understand those. And then if it's a author or somebody I know, I'll reach out to them and say, hey, do you got 5 minutes? I want to understand what you were saying here. I also attend a lot of conferences because of the trade shows, and I make sure I sit in on on those sessions. A lot of people go to trade shows who have an industry specialty, and they don't go to the sessions. And if you really want to grab hold and be a consultative person, you got to understand what's going on in that marketplace.
That's great. I'm always fascinated with so much information overload in terms of some of the strategies that you implement to keep your mind, just isolated to what that little bubble that you want to build around you.
Right.
In terms of what information you want to expose. I think that's always interesting. I realize it's a loaded question, but I'm always curious, is there an advice or maybe series of advice that you had received early in your career that you continuously refer back to and perhaps pay it forward and give it to others that you mentor?
Absolutely. There are actually two. One was my dad. He always said, never waste talent. So if you have talent, you need to make sure that talent is treasured and provided to others. And then the other was my mentor here at UHY, who actually hired me, one of the founding partners. He always said, you have to give to get. So I had two very strong people in my life who really pushed the same model, is you have to give to get. And so I pushed that very, very hard with my staff. When I meet with a client, as we talked about, where we put a staff person out there, basically free of charge, that's a give, that we're giving dollars. When I meet with a client, if they are a smaller client and I know they need some help growing, we're going to give a little bit of our time. We're going to spend some time with them and we're going to provide them with some value that, other folks probably wouldn't do because they want to be paid for every, dollar. As a professional service firm, our hours are our product. And when we're short on hours, that affects our pay. But what I've learned through the 38 years is that the more I have given to our clients and the more I have provided value to our clients, the quicker they grow, the faster we grow. My best story is I had a client, he was doing, first day I met him, he was only doing $500. He created a product called Krypton, which was Gore-Tex on steroids is what it was, because it went inside the fabric. And he was having a very hard time figuring out how to produce and push his product out into the marketplace, how no one would listen to him. He couldn't get loans, he couldn't get lending. Well, we met with him and we helped him do all that. We provided a lot of that service pretty much free of charge, because we saw him as somebody that was going to grow and had something that we had to figure out how to help him, because if we could help him, we could help us. 25 years later, he sold his company for $75 million. And it was that give, and he always says, it was always the give you gave. Your firm always never really nickeled and dimed me to death. They just gave me value. And I always felt like there was more value given than what I was paying for. And he appreciated that. And so I think that's the greatest gift as I work through and I start to head towards my retirement years. That's the gift I'm trying to give to everybody, is that you still got to give in order to get.
Wow, what a story! And thanks for sharing that. Very powerful advice. That's definitely powerful. Last but not least, in terms of books, what are you currently reading? And is there a book that you always recommend to others? And why is that?
There is, and I'm gonna look at the title over here. This is the book
Sure.
right here. It's called Legacy. It's
Uh-huh.
about the Australian football team. I highly recommend everybody builds this. About 3 years ago, our leadership changed here. You know, we went from the old guard to the new guard. We are now being run by a lot of young people, which is great because that's our succession as a firm. We're going to be able to continue our firm and grow. But what we had to do is we had to figure out a way is what is everybody's legacy going to be? What's my legacy going to be? What's my partner's legacy going to be? And so that book has really shaped our firm in a really good fashion because what it does is it constantly reminds people to look for those little areas of what do you need to do to help that person and what do you want to leave? When I leave this firm, what do I want to leave? When I leave my clients, where do I want my clients to be? You know, a lot of times, as you know, you're a professional too, and you know, in the professional world, it's the relationship of why people stay here. I don't want my client leaving when I leave. I want my client staying here, and so I got to make sure that my legacy, I define it, and I'm able to live it. And so that is my favorite book, and I read it probably every other night. And then my wife will tell you that I'm just a Jay Shetty nut. I love Jay Shetty. He's the greatest monk that never was. And I read his book pretty much every night. I read a passage out of his book as well.
That's awesome. Thank you, Jerry. And for our listeners, we'll make those titles available in the show notes. I can't thank you enough today for this very short and insightful conversation. I personally learned quite a bit. What I love doing with all the guests on IvyPodcast is do a follow-up recording in about a year where we revisit the conversation from a year ago and see if everything that we've discussed still makes sense, still applies. So I'm definitely looking forward to doing that with you, Jerry.
I love that. I love being held accountable, and we'll find out how accountable I am then. I love that.
That's right.
Great.
That's right. Thanks so much for your time.
Yep. Thank you, John. Very much appreciate it.